they have 5% share on that because it's a bridge. Whatever the total, when we get done with engineering, 5% will be their responsibility, but it's going to be closer to like 10,000, I think.
All right.
And then we're going to start shopping for the money to replace the whole thing.
Tim, I think an important thing to point out here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in addition to doing the applications and managing these projects with the state and federal governments, which is a lot of paperwork and a lot of administrative work, we also are outlaying the capital, right?
Correct.
So the county is putting this money up so that it can get reimbursed back. So it's quite a service to these towns that we had not previously provided.
So if you look at Crowfoot Hill Road with $1 million project here, we're getting ready to start that. West Turin won't have the fund balance to pay the contractors, and this is a reimbursement program. We get the money fairly quickly, 30 to 60 days, we get it back from the state, but you've got to front it first. And once we get into mid-construction, we're going to be $300,000 or $400,000 out, and we know the towns can't do that. They don't have the fund balance to do it. So it's quite a service that the county's doing to fund that, even though we'll ultimately get it back.
Can I ask a question? So Tim, do you work with the state and identify, is there like a list that you have of the bridges and which ones are rated yellow, red, and all of that? And is that an ongoing analysis you do with the state?
It is. So there is a little bit of a hitch in that system though, but all of the bridges are rated on a scale of 1 to 7 actually. And I can show you the ratings, but they break it down to 0.001. So it could be a 7 or 6.999, if it's got a small defect. And annually, before we make awards on projects, I sit down with the DOT and we go through that list together. Their structural engineers, their environment, everybody on their bridge team sits down with us and we go through, and then we start to prioritize for funding. There's 2 scores. One is just straight condition. The other one's called the Local Bridge Priority Index, and that weights the bridge by traffic volume and importance to the community. So it takes on some other elements. So we have some bridges that they rate very poorly, but they also get very little traffic. The Bailey Road Bridge would be one of those that doesn't score very well for funding because it just doesn't have traffic volume and an important need to the community. So we look at all that. We try to come up with a priority list. Now, one of the problems is that is the county's bridges. There are 30 bridges that belong to the towns. That's a separate list. And that kind of gets overlooked because who's sitting there having that conversation for those 30 bridges? And that's where I have tried to fill that gap and have taken those 30 bridges and had that conversation. And also the amount of paperwork for all of these funding streams is immense. I mean, it's a full-time job to do a bridge, and we're doing 11 of them. And the state really doesn't want to work with the towns because they're just not nimble enough to do it. They meet once a month. Oftentimes there's 10 documents in between those 30 days that have to be, signed and gone back and forth. And then a lot of times they struggle to get a fax machine to fax it back to the state or to mail it to them. And we've actually, and I have to give a lot of credit to Megan in my office, we've gone completely paperless. Nothing gets printed, nothing gets, everything is electronic. I sign it electronically, it goes right to the state can send it to me. And it's just allowed us to do this many projects. In the past, the county's never done more than 3 between design and construction. So.
I think to add to what Ryan had mentioned, look at the overall value of almost $14 million. The total capital put out between, out-of-pocket expense is around $400,000, which is only 3%.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing a $14 million capital improvement, county bridges, town bridges, but it's still within Lewis County, and all really out-of-pocket of expense is 3%, which is huge. It's huge for, it's a great work by Tim and his team and everyone at the county to, put the documents together, help the towns, and then obviously front the money going in turn, the grant secured, the money's there, and then in turn we gets paid back. But 3 pennies on the dollar, that's a big, I mean, that's huge on a capital investment.
I think on behalf of Eric, some of the towns, they've been very grateful, obviously, but even coming up with that 5%, there's been some chafing. I think it'd be just an important thing that you guys can remind them if you get a question that, us putting out that capital outlay is interest that we're foregoing, right? So that's money that we, could have been making that we're instead, waiting for reimbursement and paying out to contractors. So that's a cost to us as well. So.
And I would mention that they're not funded yet, but I put in another 10 applications for the towns this year. So we won't know. I mean, although there's a budget deal last night. So generally within 30 days of a budget deal, we'll know what bridges get funded, but they usually release that after the budget. So, which we're hearing CHIPS did not get an increase in the budget deal. So, didn't lose any money, but we didn't get any more. Okay. All right, let's start the other presentation. And I want to start with the finances, and then we'll go to the actual presentation. So up here on this spreadsheet, I want to show you the financial kind of disparities. I'm going to take the town of Martinsburg, and they have 79 miles of road, and they receive $421,000 in CHIPS money, which is a total of $5,350 per mile. If you look at the county, we have 248 miles of road. We receive $4.4 million or $14,858 in CHIPS money. So we receive approximately 3 times more money than the towns do per mile based on the CHIPS formula. So looking at that, we started to say what makes sense for the towns and the county to work together. And by all means, this is a conversation with those towns. If they're happy with what we're doing, they can continue to do that. This is not us, the county, coming in with any agenda. This is really how do we work with our towns to help strengthen them and strengthen the infrastructure for Lewis County. I would like to point out, because we will be discussing that shortly too, the county snowplow contract right now, we pay the towns $6,800 per mile to plow for us. They're only receiving $5,300 a mile for their roads to maintain them, period. Plow them, pave them, do everything on them. So our snowplow contract is a little bit more lucrative than the CHIPS formula is for them. So what we talked about is, could we use this snowplow contract and amend it to not just be plowing, but plowing, sweeping, mowing, and all of the general maintenance. So if, for example, the town turned over a mile, the town of Martinsburg turned a mile over to the county would get $15,000. They would lose $5,300, but we would then pay them that snowplow contract to mow it, sweep it, plow it, do all of the maintenance on that road. That's really the premise of how the conversation started and where it started to go. So that's a little bit about it. The towns that we're going to be that we've talked to already, there's also bridges involved, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Martinsburg has 3 and West Huron has 5. So let's get into the presentation, and I'll let you take that over, Connor. All right, some goals: maximize revenue to the county and towns, provide maximum flexibility for funding. Right now, when the towns get that $5,300 in CHIPS money, there's a lot of rules that go with it. It has to be used for something that has a 10-year lifespan. So generally, they can only use it for paving or for bridges or culverts, something that's going to last 10 years. If they surface treat with that money, they can't touch that road for another 10 years. And that has created a lot of problems for some of the towns. We have towns right now that cannot do any road work because they've chip sealed all their roads and they don't have anything that they can do. A lot of towns have stopped sealing roads because of the formula and the way it's working, which is really bad for the network. It creates efficiencies in work-related activities. We wanted to try to improve infrastructure for all the residents of Lewis County. It is not to take over anything. The county does not want to take over anything. If the towns don't want to do this, that's more than fine. It's just working with them to have a dialogue. It is to create a dialogue with the towns about what makes sense and who should be doing what. Some topics. We talked about the financials. The first thing we need to talk about is bridges and then road alignment and Tug Hill roads. When we started meeting with the towns, really three things came right to the surface. The first one is bridges. And I think there's pretty much, and I've spoken with most of the highway superintendents, on the town side, there's almost unanimous support with the county, please take over our bridges. We're not doing anything, we're just letting them fail. We don't have the money to replace them. We don't have a bridge crew to work on them, and they're just sitting there until there's a crisis. Road alignment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in that section, but that's really looking at places where it makes sense for the county or a town to own a particular road. For example, West Road, down by Snow Ridge. If you go down West Road, it's a county road. You cross over Route 26, there's about a quarter of a mile that belongs to West Turin, and then it goes back to a county road all the way to the end. So would it make sense for that one road to be owned by one single owner? So there's a number of those alignment issues that we have, identified in different towns. Not every town. A lot of towns don't have some, but there are some towns that have these kind of quirky, ownership issues. And then the other thing that came forward, which we were really not expecting to get into, but the first three towns that we met with started to talk about Tug Hill roads, and that is the trail system. And many of them would be happy to work with the county to create a county-owned system throughout the Tug Hill. So we can talk a little bit about that. So bridges. There are 89 county-owned bridges in Lewis County right now. There are 30 town-owned bridges. So the exposure to the county is about 30 bridges. And as you just saw from that other spreadsheet, to replace a bridge is between $1 million and $2 million. So you're looking anywhere from $30 to $60 million of liability with those bridges. And I say liability because a bridge is not an asset. It is a liability. And I will caution you, right now, the county is helping the towns, and we're doing everything we can, but the political liability would shift. Right now, when a bridge gets closed, it's the towns, and that's where everybody shows up. However, they come to you as legislators and say, what are you going to do to help us? Right now, if the county takes them, that crowd's going to be here saying that bridge is closed. And if we don't have funding for those bridges, right now, we've been very successful, but I can't guarantee that that will always be the case. And sometimes, particularly with the town-owned bridges, I think the biggest risk is they're in a more accelerated rate of decay. So a failure could come up very quickly, and then the solution might be a 2-year solution, because it usually takes me 2 to 3 years by the time I get funding and get that bridge constructed. And what are you going to tell the public for that 2 years, right? So that's the risk. I'm just trying to give you all of the pros and cons of each of these conversations. We met with Martinsburg. They were the first town that we initially met with. They have 3 bridges. They would like to turn all 3 over to us. They identified Whitaker Road. This was their identification, not ours. I really didn't see any alignment issues in Martinsburg. However, they feel that Whitaker Road's traffic volume is so high because of the asphalt plant and the quarries that are there, that it would be better if it was a county road. They feel that they cannot properly keep up with that road because of the traffic that's on it. So they identified that one as one that they would prefer the county to own. And then they identified Tug Hill roads, and they felt that there is a number of issues there that they think the county would be better served owning or managing those roads. And the biggest one is the liability of, or the pressure of people moving up there, plowing them, maintaining them. So what was proposed by Martinsburg was Flat Rock Road, just the unpaved portion of it. Centerville Road, 3.49 miles. Graves Road, 3.39 miles. Houseville Road, Graves to Talbot. And that essentially is the main trail system through Martinsburg. Snowmobile, and in the summertime, the ATV trail system. So that was their proposal to us, and that we would use the snowplow contract to figure out how to do the maintenance of that. Turin, we just recently met with Turin and West Turin. They have no bridges. They identified Mackey Road because if anybody's familiar with Mackey, the county owns all but about 1/10 of a mile of that road. And then Turin owns 1/10 of it. So it would just make sense for that to be one road. Segments of East Road, because East Road is a town road, county road, goes back to a town road, and then it goes to a county road again. Just making that one contiguous thing. And then the same with Tug Hill Roads, Gomer Hill Road, Morgan Road, Houseville, Talbot, Lee Golf, possibly Lee Golf. I will say that Turin expressed a little bit of concern. They're a small town, and if they gave up any roads, what would that do to them in the long haul? Their concerns that they expressed were twofold. They like the whole concept and the idea, but what if 5 years from now the legislators don't choose to have them do the maintenance? That would be a huge financial impact to them. And that was really their only concern. West Turin, they have 5 bridges. They would love for the county to take all 5 of them. West Road, Byron's Corners Road, both of those are alignment issues, and they would be happy to see that get straightened out. And then the Tug Hill Roads, and that's really North Road, 6.4 miles, and Plummer Road, 3.79, and Moore Road, maybe 1.93, and to use the snowplow contract. So that's a little bit about how that went. And so the next steps, I'd like some feedback from the committee specifically on bridges, because if there isn't an appetite, we'll just end that conversation with them. If there is, we'll continue discussions. Meetings with additional towns, if you're so inclined, we'll continue to meet with some towns and keep working on this. We do need to negotiate a new snow and ice agreement. And as we're doing that, it might be helpful to understand if we're going to go forward with this. And then I believe that the Tug Hill Roads are a larger conversation. We need to involve the Tug Hill Commission, county planning, because I think our comprehensive plan should be part of that. We have to include Jackie, recreation trails and forestry, because there are some legal issues and concerns that we've addressed that need to be vetted, whether that's even feasible. So I would recommend that the Tug Hill stuff is a longer term project, and we kind of look at that as a bigger conversation and then focus on the smaller bites for right now. But that's just my recommendation, and I'm looking for some feedback.
I'd like to still discuss the bridges.
I'll agree with Tom. I think the bridges, Tim, you and your department were kind of handling them now for the towns. They are a town, not an asset, but a liability. But when the bridge does get red tagged, the towns or the people in that area will come to the county, and because it is a road to come across from their township to the county to go to work, places of business. So it ultimately will probably fall in the county's lap. So we are doing the upfront heavy lifting on that. I do agree, Tim, your department has a bridge work crew. They do inspection, preliminary inspection, pressure washing, cleaning, where the towns don't. So I do agree there's further decay or faster decay in town bridges where they're overlooked until they do fall in. I agree with the road efficiency, like East Road, for example. Town, county, town, you're passing each other down the road. One picks the plow, one drops the plow. It'll save in fuel, labor, just overall efficiencies. And in turn, tie it to the renegotiation of the snowplow contract. If you did 7 miles, for example, at 5,300, that's 37,000 in revenue. You did 7 miles at, say, $8,000. That's just a number been thrown out there. That's 56,000. That's an increase of just about $19,000 to the town in revenue, which in turn isn't tied up like chips. They can take that $19,000 of additional money on top of what would have been chips and invest that into the road repairs to get their substructures, subgrade up to par. So that money's not tied up for 10 years down the road. There's pros and cons. I think the bridges were kind of thrown in as a bartering or give and take, but I think it's a good way to tie everything across the county for main roads and the Tug Hill roads with the connective corridor for both ATV and snowmobiling. So.
Any other comments or questions for Tim? Would like to hear your input at this meeting. Joan, you have anything to say?
Tim and I did discuss a little bit about, if we cleared up some of the roads and had the county take over the ownership of those roads that are intertwined, certainly makes sense. We would make sure to tighten up that snow plowing agreement, just to make sure that if we're relying on the town highway departments to maintain it and all, we want to make sure it's up to the standard that the county highway guys usually do it, because otherwise we're just going to have more problems. But I'm sure that all can be addressed.
So the snowplow contract, none of this is time sensitive except for the snowplow contract, because that is up in December 30th, and we really need to get going on renegotiating that. In the past, that's been, I think I've been through 2 negotiations, very much led by the legislators, right? So, you guys leading that along with the town highway superintendents. So we got to get moving on that. The question is, do any of these other changes influence those contracts? If we change some road mileage, the bridges, does that influence those contracts? So I don't think we necessarily need a decision. No one's saying, hey, decide right now to give up, take 30 bridges. But, there is how generous or not we are in that snowplow contract, I think really has a lot to do with this larger conversation, And then on the bridges, just another point. I would agree that, the county's probably the best equipped to take care of them right now. You're talking about a 100-year commitment. We don't know where we're going to be in terms of personnel. We don't know where the state or federal commitment is going to be in terms of, commitment to rural infrastructure. It would not be hard to imagine a future in New York State where a large portion of CHIPS is diverted to the MTA, subways. It's, you've got to really think about the long term. But anyhow.
Just wondering, Tim, if you think some sort of IMA with the towns in terms of helping them with those meetings that you have with the state to go through each bridge and get a better dialogue from the town personnel with the state bridge personnel, that maybe you're going to have to, help them do that, to identify those bridges so that maybe the towns can pay a little bit more attention to what bridges are really faltering.
We are kind of doing that. So when I first met with the DOT and they said they really didn't want to work with the towns on these, I met with the Town Highway Superintendents Association where we have monthly luncheons. And I said, would you guys mind if I did these for you? And they said, absolutely not. So that's how this has kind of all come about, is all of the town projects that we have, I've agreed to sponsor them. Basically, I've put in the application. When they're awarded, we do all the paperwork, and the town basically just says thank you. And the first 3, Turin, Bailey Road, West Turin, and the way those were done is the town put in we put in the application on behalf of the town as a sponsor. The problem with that is all the paperwork has to be signed by them and board resolutions have to be done by them. And we found that very problematic. The state has come back and said, in the future, we'd like the county to put in the application on behalf of the town. And that way everything comes through this board and we're much more smooth at it. So that's what we've done with the last applications. We had 3 projects though that kind of were our test, and they didn't go as smoothly as we'd hope because you're still running them through the towns for all the resolutions and stuff. So, but either way, we're going to work with the towns on those bridges. So it's, that's not going to change.
Where does that leave us on the Tug Hill roads with ATVs that, Jackie's already has agreements with them?
That's why I think that's a bigger conversation, because I think there's some legal issues there that we've got to vet. I think there's some planning issues. I think a bigger conversation, Barry, that we've never had. I mean, I think each town has, but maybe as a whole community, we haven't had is what roads on the Tug Hill do we want to protect so that they don't get plowed and maintained? And what roads do we want to allow development pressure to happen on? Because it's happening, it's coming. We're seeing it. We're seeing pressure all the time to plow more roads, but it's each individual town fighting that fight on their front. And it just seems like if we had a more holistic conversation, it might be better for us.
And how does our insurance company feel about us taking this for the ATVs? I mean, because
So I don't see an insurance issue at all. I mean, we can look into it, but
Yeah.
a public highway is not designed for cars. They're designed for every form of transportation out there. So horses, you name it. And that's kind of one of the misnomers I hear all the time is people are like, there's tractors tearing up my road, or there's, Amish or whatever. It's not what in highway law, a highway is for the public to use in any capacity that they see.
even the ATVs that can't be licensed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So, and there's special provisions about snowmobiles as well. So, yeah, I don't see that as I mean, people could be doing an illegal activity and get hurt on your road, and we still have, we still have to insure it, and it's still a liability. Which happens more often than you think when somebody's uninsured and unlicensed in a car, and then they drive off a bridge, and then next thing you know, we're getting hauled into court.
So Tim, back on the bridges for a second. So, and the majority of the bridges our financial exposure is about 5%, and the rest is paid for by state, federal, whatever.
Correct.
So with us increasing the CHIPS funding to $15,000 a mile, that extra would more than cover that 5% exposure, I'm
Correct.
thinking.
Yes.
Maybe you covered this one before
Yes.
I got here, but
Yes.
okay.
I think and bridges are, the reason I think bridges are a problem is for the towns. Isn't that the resources aren't there because they're currently built into the CHIPS formula to supposedly help pay for those. But to plan for that replacement, you've got to be planning for 75 years from now. If I build a brand new bridge, I've got to be putting money aside for 75 years. That doesn't happen because the funding isn't enough to even take care of the roads. So the money gets diverted there. Then when the bridge fails, they go, we don't have enough money. Well, it's a planning conversation, right? And I think, but yes, that you would be increasing the revenue enough to offset that 5% as long as they plan properly for it. My suspicion is they won't, but
This is probably a question for Joan. What is the maximum time frame on an IMA? Is it 10 years?
The ones that we've been doing, we usually do them for 3 to 5 years, just so everybody reviews it once again to see if there's any, if they want to continue it, amend it, or bring it more up to date. So I'm not sure that there's a 10-year limit. I think you can go beyond that, but most of the ones we do are 5 years.
Okay, that was the part of the concern from the towns is if the board were to change, and in 5 years, the county would stop paying maintenance, to the towns for maintaining the transfer of ownership. I didn't know, this is just in the infancy stages, obviously, in discussion, throwing ideas out there to be efficient with the roads, but I think, in my opinion, be the longest term, and within the IMA, have a percentage increase, obviously, because operating expense, labor goes up for the town. So that would be built into it, but it was more of a barrier for the towns for protection wise.
And on the road alignment issue, I do think, I look at county roads as being roads that connect communities, right? So connecting, Loudville to Martinsburg or et cetera. East Road is a great example. West Road's a great example. But there are some, for example, Erie Canal, right? That goes from one end of the county to the other and has got 5 towns that you're going to go through. Is that a conversation, right? And that's really what we were trying to do, is just look at those situations. We haven't had a conversation with them, but Lionsdale owns Moose River Road, which is probably one of the heavier trafficked roads and a important artery into the Adirondack Park. And that town is left on its own to take care of that. Does that make sense? That was really the conversation that we were hoping to get. So.
Any other comments or concerns? Okay.
All right.
Thank. Okay, now I think I need a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to approve the March 19th committee minutes if no amendments. Do I have a second? Vinnie? And is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, carried. And so to start, we have one presentation today, and it is about the Lewis County Health Systems Capital Project, an update from the Lewis County Health Systems CEO, Jerry Care.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the invitation to visit with you today. Ryan had approached me and said, could we do an update? And so thinking about how best to give you an update, I thought I would share with you the report we give each month to the Capital Oversight Committee, which is a piece of our Building and Grounds Committee. On the committee, it's chaired by Don Musnicki. And other members include former legislator John Lehman, Dr. Howard Demeny, and our two newest members, our legislator Nortz and Rick Schwartz. So that's our committee. So every month, we do it the third Monday of the month. We give an update on the project. We've been doing this for 2 years now. And then in turn, Mr. Musnicki provides the Board of Managers an update on the fourth Wednesday of the month. So what I thought we could do, and at the end, if you stay engaged, we can show you some pictures, and we'll do that on the PowerPoint. I was a teacher and that used to work, so we'll see if it still works. So this is called the Capital Improvement Oversight Committee Monthly Report. And I'm just going to talk you through the pages very quickly and then give you opportunities to ask questions. Each month, there is an executive summary that the construction management group, specifically led by Mike Newfer, gives to the committee. And this report, I would just highlight a couple of things. One, he mentioned that on March 14th, we had an inspection which allowed us to take occupancy of the East Wing rooms, the Phase 5 nurses station, and support rooms. And so that's sort of how we talk. The project has been broken into many phases, and each of the phases has required a DOH visit to allow us to move to the next step. In this period, we also had the generator installed, and I'll be able to show you a picture of that shortly. So the oversight is exactly just that. If there is something that isn't great to report, there would be a brief mention in the report. So an example, if timelines aren't met, like our project was supposed to be completed in December of last year. So when it became clear that wasn't going to happen, then it would have made its way into the executive summary. And then Mike will address what the critical issues are over the next month. So we break it into pieces. And so in the next month, we were focused on phases 4 and 5 and delivering those on time, which we did, which then led to the appropriate inspections to occur. So when the committee meets next Monday, they will talk about that. Then Mike will review the schedule, and you can see the parts of the schedule that are reflected here. And then we go through what's called summary of major work activities by the bid package since the last report. I won't read each line to you, but our general contractor is the Black Horse Group out of Watertown. Mechanical is Hydestone. Plumbing, J.E. Sheehan. Electrical, Nitric, and site work is Barrett Construction. Now, over the winter months, Barrett wasn't essentially there, but all of the other contractors were there, and there was a regular report on their activities. Then we go through a process of reporting upcoming work activities for the various phases. So what you'll see here is, the enabling area, phase 2, 3, the electrical building have all been turned over to us. What used to be the adult daycare space in the facility, it had our rooms now that were used for storage, but will be turned over shortly. And it was really around punch list items. And then the phases 4, 5, and 6. So we are able to communicate to the committee, what's coming up. The other part of our package and what we review are the meeting minutes from over the past month. So in this report, we had meeting minutes for February 7th, 21, 28, and March 13. We don't review in detail each of the meeting minutes, but it gives the board members who are on this committee the opportunity to follow the progress. So the meeting minutes reflect progress meetings that are scheduled every Wednesday. Now in February, obviously there was a Wednesday we didn't meet and it coincided with school vacation week. But it is a way to link schedule with work and then the weekly meetings that reflect what was done and where we stand in the project. So then we go to section G, which, as you might expect, both the Capital Oversight Committee and the Finance Committee have an interest in. And this is where we give a detailed report on the budget by the contractors. And it's pretty detailed. And if you are in that section, you will see title and description, the amount. So it just gives you a sense for where we are set against the bids that were accepted. So clearly what the committee wants to know and what the board wants to know, and the finance committee, are we on budget? And yesterday we had our finance committee meeting and our CFO reported that we are on budget and we will stay within the bonded amount for the project. So we won't be coming back looking for resources. We're working through the process. This does not include what is raised in the capital campaign. The capital campaign is to help us with future costs associated with the project. This is strictly the cost to construct. And a portion of that included what we needed to purchase for equipment and furniture. In last year's capital budget, we also incorporated the furniture we would need for the project. Then within the report, there are pictures of the development of the project. And as you can see in this report, there were several. You got to remember the committee is seeing this on a monthly basis, so the pictures have a bit of meaning and relevance to the phase that we're reporting on. So once we're done with the construction portion of the report, then we have the architect report, and that's at the end of the packet. Our architectural group is BCA. They have done other work for the county, and they go through a similar process, critical issues, coordination of owner equipment, job changes, and it's section 1 and 3 and 4 submittal reviews, which I think are the most critical for us. What are the critical issues at that point in time? What are the job changes and what are the submittal reviews? Obviously with the architect, we're very much involved in managing the schedule. The early part of the project, there were two things that impacted the schedule. One were the supply chain issues, and that was borne out last month when the generator finally arrived. The generator was 2 years, I'm not going to say delayed, but it was impacting. And so that is there's something we've had to manage and understand. The other significant impact on the schedule has been manpower or, worker availability. The contractors have not been able to supply the appropriate number of men and women consistently to meet the timelines. Again, it's kind of the post-COVID era and what has occurred. Each week, we also put a specific focus on safety. I'm pleased to share that we've had no injuries on this project and, good oversight of the building process. So kind of high level, how we're managed, and we're meeting budget targets. And at this point, we are 4 months off our finish date. So we did pull the liquidated damages lever against the primary contractor, and that's been in place since early January. So let's look at a few pictures. This up on the screen, that is the main entrance of the surgical pavilion. So what we tried to do here is show you sort of in the construction phase and, closer to the finished project. So this is looking at the Med-Surg nurses station. This area of the hospital was formerly the entrance to the original 2 operating rooms, the 1980s portion of the building. Okay, here we're looking at what used to be the ICU, and the picture on the left shows you, when they were doing the rough-ins, and in this picture, it looks like they're working on electrical. And then you sort of see the finished room, and those windows were not there previously, and that looks out to the circle driveway. This is the only 2-person room on medical surgical. So it's the largest of all of our rooms, and we anticipate that if folks are admitted for comfort care measures, meaning they're beginning to approach the dying process, we would be able to accommodate large families and to have them be part of this process. We have 2 rooms. One is a single, one is a double. The double is what gives us the extra room. That's just trying to be there for our families. So we used to have an ICU. We've transitioned it to critical care. As a rural critical access hospital, ICU is really not what we do. So critical care is more reflective. This is where the old operating rooms used to be. So what you see on the left is what the space looked like after demolition, and now the steel studs are going up and it's being insulated in sheetrock. And then the picture on the right is what it looks like from the new nurses station in that part of the building. What you'll see here that's different than a traditional medical surgical room is the front wall is glass. So from the nurses station, you have eyes on the patient. All the rooms, again, are singles, and from the State Street side of the hospital, you will have seen a number of windows that have been installed. These are the rooms associated with those windows. So we had a drone up a few weeks ago, and this is what it's starting to look like. Now, in a couple of more weeks and a few more rainstorms, that hill will be green. But this gives you a nice sense from the circle driveway of how the operations have grown since 1931. So you can still see the original hospital. You can see the 1970s construction of medical surgical. You can see the 1980s construction associated with the operating rooms. You can see the doctor's building, which we call the Medical Arts Center in DeVita. To the left, you can see the nursing home. And behind the nursing home, it's called the Children's Building, but it houses public health, hospice, and the Certified Home Health Agency, WIC, and the North Country Dental Clinic. And then you can see the new building in the back and the connecting driveway. Now, we're careful not to call it a road because it would be a fun stretch of tar to drive fast on. So we call it a driveway to help slow everyone down. And then Mountain View, which is part of the county's holdings and sitting on top of the hill. This is looking at it from the landing zone, which was added maybe 5 years ago. Over the winter had quite a bit of use. We probably have between 35 and 50 helicopter transports a year. We're in that range. We started off the winter with several, and recently we've gone through a period where it has slowed down. And you can see, I think the architectural group did a wonderful job in incorporating the unique challenges of the topography to make it work, highlighting, the rock feature. We're putting together a committee to help us think about how we can enhance the landscaping related to the new project. Paint and landscaping, everyone has an opinion. So one of the ways to navigate that is to have a committee of people who are knowledgeable about those sorts of things. And that's what we'll be doing. Here is the generator that was 2 years in the making, being put in place. This generator is between the nursing home and the new surgical pavilion. While the project was underway, we had backup generators in place because we had to disconnect from our original generator. So there was a 3-hour period a month ago where we had to go off generator. So in the middle of the night, they actually did the connections to the new generator because that is the period of time when there's the least demand for power in the building. The other thing I want to highlight is to the left, you'll see some green painted parking spaces. We have 2 units, but 4 EV chargers that are just open. And every single day there are cars charging there. So, we added to the, our local capacity for electric vehicle charging. I think in time it'll get used even more. But community members, visitors to our community will pull in because it is now you can find this charging station on the website, on the EV charging website. This is looking at it almost, top down, but it would be as though we were closer to Mountain View. And it's really showing you the new building set against the original hospital, set against the 70s and 80s construction. You can see we have 4 spaces for EV units, and you can see on this particular day, 1 vehicle was charging when this picture was taken. You can see the generator, which, one of the drawbacks to the project is how close it's at to the wooden pavilion, which is an outdoor area for the nursing home. But we have some privacy screens that'll go up once the weather warms up, some plantings, and we have a group looking at creating more additional outdoor space for the residents of the nursing home. Just, I think, a nice shot of the property. This picture is showing the top picture before this would have been in the fall. You can see there's no tar, there's no signage, there are no generators, and if you look below, you can see those added. The fencing, the rails are not installed. If you look lower picture all the way to the left, we have the appropriate handrails in place. So those are the pictures. So I think the Board of Managers and our committee structure has done a great job in oversight. We essentially have two committees that have an interest in this project, the actual committee of jurisdiction, which is the Capital Oversight Committee and the Finance Committee. And then the entire board gets their monthly report. So with that, do you have any questions? All right. Well, if any of you want to come by for a tour, we don't have to use hard hats anymore. Just give a call and we can take you through the buildings, the new construction, and we can take you out on a construction site. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a couple draft resolutions.
The first one is amending compensation plan with reference to the Department of Social Services by creating one full-time case supervisor, grade B, at $30.32 up to $35.41 per hour, effective July 15th, 2024 through September 30th, 2024, to allow for backfill, training, and transition.
Any discussion?
I really like the concept of the transition in training along with the individual that's there. Because I always look at knowledge and experience as like a capital asset. I really enjoy should be set up kind of as a standard.
For the
You know-
transition.
Yeah, for the transition.
Nope, we're pretty optimistic on that one. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
The second one is authorizing renewal agreement between Lewis County Department of Social Services and Cornell Cooperative Extension of Lewis County to provide parent education, supportive, and rehabilitative services from June 1st, 2024 through May 31st, 2025, at a flat fee of $5,887 per month, not to exceed $70,644 per year.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Carried? Yeah. I'm sorry, I thought I heard a question.
I've got one, but I'm not on the committee.
Go ahead. I don't think so. Ryan?
No, it should just be per month.
Yeah, I think it's just at a max for
Okay, because-
multiple families.
Because if you look at the resolution, it reads a fee of $5,887 per month per family.
Mine says per month.
Aren't
The-
they-
Oh, the resolution itself.
In
I
the
was saying,
resolution itself.
The second decretal paragraph. We can correct that for the final paper.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's not per family. Okay.
So with that correction.
Sounds like a pretty good deal, though.
So with that correction to remove the per family portion, then all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, carried. Thank you for that catch. We have no motions and no executive session. So I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Okay, Tom. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned.
the minutes as written, unless there are any amendments. Do I get a second for that? Herb, second. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Minutes are carried. We don't have any presentations, so we don't have to listen to Ryan. And we'll move on to draft resolutions.
The first one is authorizing grant application for Round 8 Restore New York funding for up to $2 million to redevelop the decommissioned Lions Falls Elementary Facility. And if awarded, will administer the grant in accordance with all applicable rules and regulations established by E ESDC.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Who actually owns the building?
I think we own it right now.
Once it's done, what are we gonna do with it? Once it's all cleaned up? Are we gonna sell it or develop it or?
It
Yep.
will probably go through the IDA to be sold, redeveloped, whatever. Very similar to what we did with the Glenfield School.
Yep, our goal is to get it to a point that a developer, it would be attractive to a developer. As it sits right now with some of the environmental abatement, there's some structural, Larry's a lot more familiar, but there's some roof issues and some other, basic things we want to take care of through grants. Once we can get those done, then hopefully we can, through the IDA, find a developer that in fact, the same exact developer that is at Glenfield has expressed interest in this building as well. So.
Anything else?
Just one other comment. There's also another grant in the works on this, which is New York Forward. And it had to be a municipal sponsored process to the grant process. So the county held title to it until we can move it forward, as Ryan pointed out, so that it's attractive to a private developer.
We'll want the LCDC or Naturally Lewis to do that process because they can be more distinguishing in terms of who they pick, right? So if the county tries to sell a building, we really have to go to the highest bidder, whereas they can really try to find a developer that has the most likelihood of having success. So that's why we typically move those properties through the LCDC.
Any other questions, comments on it? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Sorry, authorizing agreement with Development Authority of the North Country for professional consultant and project management services in redevelopment of the former Lions Falls School at a total cost not to exceed $12,000.
Any questions or comments?
I can tell you that from the planning department, they have that funding in their community development account for this cost.
Good. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Appropriating payback funds from CDBG in the amount of $5,607.43 to Planning and Community Development account line to be used for various community projects.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Awarding bid and authorizing contract between the County of Lewis and Tetra Tech Incorporated to update FEMA compliant Lewis County Hazard Mitigation Plan at a cost not to exceed $137,732.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Awarding bid and authorizing contract between the County of Lewis and Adirondack Operations LLC Environmental Consulting to complete a professional hazardous material study on all buildings for Two Brothers LLC Cheese Dairy Plant in the town of New Bremen at a cost not to exceed $22,268.
Any questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What's the term mean legal access? We don't have access to it right now?
No, we're in the process of obtaining that, hopefully getting that access from Tubro directly. I went through the EPA, who had previously gotten an access agreement from them when they first went in and took out all those barrels. So hopefully this week I'll have something from them, and if not, there's a procedure I can go to the Supreme Court on to get temporary access on behalf of the county to do environmental studies.
Have there been any studies done before this other than the EPA? Or is this the next step in this?
This is the next step.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Authorizing settlement in pending tax assessment challenge by Erie Boulevard Hydropower against the town of Krogan for the 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023 proceedings with refunds payable by the county for overpayments for said years determined to be approximately $93,000, and further approves the agreed upon terms pertaining to the application of RPTL 727 for the assessments on the subject properties for the 2024, 2025, and 2026 assessment rolls.
Questions or comments?
Tom, I can give a little bit more information on that. The proposed settlement agreement has been circulated to all of to the town, to the school district, and the attorney for the hydropower company has indicated that they are in agreement with the terms of the settlement as well. We have a conference on Monday with the court on this. It's likely to be adjourned when we tell the court that we have a potential settlement on this. And I would just tell the board that the experience we've had on these matters, if we end up going to trial on this, it would cost us a lot more for additional experts, time, and with the likelihood that maybe we wouldn't end up at the assessment rates that are in the proposed agreement.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Carried. We don't have any motions. Unless there's in some other business, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for an update on the county cybersecurity posture. These are matters which will imperil government security and safety if disclosed. Do I get a motion? Jeff, got a second? Herb? All in favor of executive session, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are now in executive session.